Hi, Casey, can you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to start in just a minute. Okay.
5 o'clock. Start the meeting. First thing is calling the meeting to order. Second period of public participation. Where any public that wants to. Okay, there being none. Next item, superintendent, the COVID-19 transition plan.
So I'm going to try to go through this relatively quick for the sake of time and to offer a chance for questions. Essentially, what we're presenting tonight is a recommendation for a transition plan that will hopefully display that we are moving in a different direction with our response to the pandemic and working within guidelines that we've have been the entire time. So on March 2, the Maine Department of Human Health and Services and the DOE advised Maine school units and child care providers that effective March 9, universal masking is no longer a statewide recommendation. In these settings, but is optional. So with that, this is the first time in over a year that we have a recommendation that is not universal masking, but rather optional masking. So what are these new recommendations and what are some other relaxed measures that we are presenting tonight? So we'd like to be in alignment with the Maine CDC's recommendation that we move to universal masking. You move from universal masking to optional masking. And we recommend also that we have one consideration for that, and that's school outbreak. In the event that Maine CDC places a school in outbreak status, which is currently defined as 15% or more of the school population being out for school for COVID-19 related reasons, the school will move back to universal masking for 5 days until the school absenteeism rates decline to less than the 15% threshold. I'll just remind the board that in 2 years of responding to this pandemic, you've only had one of your schools go into a school outbreak, and it was at the height of the Omicron surge. So we did not have school outbreak for 2 years. So I'm not saying it's a rare thing, but it's a rare thing. But we think that would be a responsible reason to go back at least for 5 days so those numbers could decrease. We want to ensure that staff who choose to continue to wear masks, those staff that want to continue, and they want a more robust mask. We have a KN95 mask available upon request. KN95s are not fit tested masks. They're not like the N95, which requires the fit testing, but they are a little bit better quality mask than what I'm wearing here today. And so we do have a supply of those that we would offer up to staff who need it. For students, for those parents who choose to have their children wear masks in school, the parents will need to communicate that request to the teacher and school administration. Those students will receive reminders from school personnel up to the extent possible. Students who do not comply with this parent request will be referred back to the parent. Schools will not discipline students for non-compliant of mask wearing as requested by the parent. We have been mask mandators for 2 years, and we're no longer going to do that at school. We're going to let the parents communicate that with their child, and let the parent and child, will help the parent and child with the miscommunication to the best that we can, but we will not step in and discipline. I have a sample letter. This is just sample language that we would like to send to parents immediately. If you do adopt this recommendation, we would send a message out tonight so that parents understand the expectation with regards to what their role is in communicating that with us and what our role is in communicating what's happening with them. Similar to if a parent wanted their children to wear ski pants at recess. We're not going to discipline the child. We're going to tell the parent, your child doesn't want to wear ski pants, and we'll continue that dialogue. School transportation, on February 25, the US CDC removed the public transportation mandate. If you remember, we had a mandate on school buses that all children had to wear masks regardless of what your determination was for schools. That is now removed. So we are recommending that whatever we do for our schools, we're also going to do on our transportation. So if you vote to go optional masking, there will be optional masking on buses. It's no longer a recommendation to keep bus windows open for ventilation purposes. So our students will be a lot warmer on the bus on cold winter days. However, when it does get nicer, we're going to open the windows just because it's nice to have a non-stinky bus. Other relaxed measures that are comfortable with our nursing staff, comfortable with our administrative staff, and still keep us within the guidelines. Our temperature scanning units, the ones that we have at the doorway, we're going to put those away. Actually, we'll put one in the nurse's office so the nurses can continue to use that. But we're no longer going to serial monitor in the morning. We will check temperatures when students are complaining of fevers, like we always have. So we're going to use temperature scan units. We're just not going to have students line up and scan them one by one as they come in. That's an extra layer of strategy that we no longer need to use. Water fountains, any of the water fountains that we put caps on to not let kids drink from the fountain, it's now safe to remove those. We're going to promote bottle filling stations just because we've invested in them and they're cleaner. They have filtration systems. So that's a better way to drink water. But you're no longer going to see any caps on water fountains restricting a quick sip from the water fountain. School lunches, directional seating, students all facing the same way in desks is no longer necessary in the cafeteria. However, we still have to keep the 3-foot distancing. So we're going to work with the administration on how we can bring back tables possibly, because that is something that we think it's time for. Removing those desks in the cafeteria and trying to get some students now sitting with their peers. We're going to promote more diagonal seating to try to keep that 3-foot distancing so that you're not at least straight across from someone as best that we can. So we'll work with administration on the best way to do that and see if we can still adhere to the 3-foot distancing that still exists in the guidelines. School visitors, we're going to try to no longer limit access to school visitors. I say try because lunches still will be tight. So having memes and matants come for a school lunch might not be possible while we still have the 3-foot distancing. So that type of visitation might be limited unless we find another location for lunch for that to happen. But volunteerism, that type of thing, we're going to encourage it once again and open our doors once again to the public as long as we are still in the same designation that we're in right now. School presentations, trips, we're going to try to promote, and under school presentations and trips are also, things that we had in the past, concerts and special events and that type of thing, that all falls under it. We're going to try to no longer limit these type of things and try to bring back what we've had in the past to the extent that we can possible. Again, the distancing is still a thing, so we still have to work within that. Building usage, we're going to try to promote building usage as much as we can for rentals and that type of thing, similar to how we had prior to COVID-19. And then staff entrance, I don't know if it makes a difference at Wisdom, but I know that In a lot of our schools, we had limited entrances to only where scanning units were, and I think it's similar at Wisdom as well. If staff were used to parking in different locations, they can now enter from those various locations as they had in the past. That's just a nice little perk for the staff, so they don't have to all funnel through the same entrance. So we can do these things safely while still working within the guidelines, and we hope that you will accept part of that. There are things that haven't changed that we still have to work within. Our response to isolation and quarantine is still guided by the main CDC SOP. The last update of that was February 16, I believe. So we still have to work within whatever the response measures are. So when a student has to go into isolation or required quarantine, we have to follow those strategies. That's something that's required by schools. Maine CDC is the local health authority for the state of Maine. So that's not going to change for now. What the isolation and quarantine says is that you have a 5-day isolation or quarantine period if you're a close contact and you're non-vaccinated. You can come back to school on day 6 if your symptoms have gone away, but on days 6 through 10, so the last 5 days of your isolation quarantine period, you are required to wear a mask. It's going to be kind of challenging for us to figure out how to do that. We'll use some Google Docs, some shared Google Docs, and try to communicate that as best that we can. But we're going to be asking the students and the families to please be on the honor system about, if you had COVID and you're coming back, please wear your mask for 5 days upon coming back. And we'll try to do our best at the school level to communicate, that the importance of that. Contact tracing is no longer what it was in the past. We do it to the extent possible. For us at schools, we're going to focus on the family unit. If we have siblings throughout the school, one sibling in grade 1, one grade 5, one in grade 12, and we know one student is positive, we're going to contact trace that family unit. Not because we're picking on the family, because we know that family spread is one of the highest indicators of spread throughout this whole pandemic. Physical distancing, as I said, is 3 feet, and it's within that 15-minute period. If you cannot maintain that distance, we're going to have to make some measures for masking. But with Wisdom, we feel we can successfully do the 3-foot distancing as we have throughout this whole thing. Outdoors is still wide open. There's no measures for any kind of mitigation strategies at all for outdoors. So when it does get nice, like in the last week of June for school, we'll go outside and use outdoor classrooms. So we'll try to use our outdoor spaces as best that we can. Spring sports are coming. Those are all outdoor sports. So there shouldn't be any masking or anything recommended for that. With regards to sports, we're going to follow the MPA's guidelines. Whatever the MPA puts out, we've always said we're going to follow that, and we're going to continue to do that. And as I said, with a spring sport coming, it shouldn't be so much of a big deal. We're going to continue to urge sick people to stay home, and we're going to send sick people home. Nurses have done that since the history of school. You're sick, go home. You're sick, go home. We're going to continue to use that strategy. We do not want sick people, whether it's COVID-19, the kooky bug, or whatever. We don't want sick people in school. So we're going to urge families to continue to follow that. Pool testing strategy is still a recommended strategy. It was less effective when we had a high content of spread in our community because it was hard to trace where that was all coming from. Now that our numbers have gone low, pool testing is a great way to find early detection if somebody is positive for COVID-19. And even though it's a couple days delayed to get those results, we can still slow that spread if we find out who's positive in a pool. So it's still something that we like families to consider. And then further recommendations from school nurses that's also supported by the SOP as a recommendation. After day 5 of the isolation quarantine period, a negative test result will be needed to return on day 6. So what we're asking is if you had COVID-19, you would like to return on day 6. We would like you to get that free test from Walgreens, St. John Valley Pharmacy, Northern Maine Medical Center, Fisher Rural Health, whatever pharmacies we have or centers that do that. or we can provide a test at school. So if you don't want to go search for your own test, we'll test you at school. We're not going to take the at-home test just because of validity and accuracy of that. We'd like our nurses to conduct those tests if it's going to be a rapid antigen test, or if you're getting it at one of our providers, that's fine as well. So we're on track to getting back to normal, and although the recommendations in this transition plan do not put us all the way there, it's a step in the right direction that we hope is going to be a welcome for everyone. One thing that I will add to this presentation is some of the changes that have happened since the Maine CDC made their announcement. There's also been some changes. Share my screen here. There's also been some changes at the we're not going to play Wordle. That's fine, by the way. So if you go to uscdc.org, right on their main page, this is a new update, and it's on the screen behind me. Now you can do a quick quick county check. So you can select your state, which is for us, state of Maine, and your county, Aroostook County, and you can get a quick update of what your county is designated as according to the US CDC. The US CDC has moved to a 3-tier system. Before they had a 4-tier system, now it's 3. It's either low, medium, or high. Low is good, high is bad, medium is medium. According to the US CDC, if your community is in a low or medium, they too recommend optional masking. So not only is the Maine CDC saying they recommend optional masking effective the 9th, we are actually under the US CDC's recommendation right now to move to optional masking because we are in a medium designation. Every county in the state of Maine is medium right now at that yellow designation. Every Thursday, this is updated according to the US CDC, so that we'll have at least every week we'll know what's going on. I had reached out to Dr. Hart early on last week prior to another school board meeting just to find out her take on this because we do like to communicate with our medical advisors. At the time I asked, Maine had not the Maine CDC had not given their recommendation yet. It was the task force opinion at Northern Maine Medical Center that because Aroostook County is a little bit delayed in the rest of the state of Maine, we wait till late March, early April, as much as possible to make the switch. With the switch coming faster, not only with the Maine CDC making their recommendation for the 9th, but also now Aroostook moving to yellow. Although Northern Maine Medical Center staff would have liked at least a 2-week period out of February break, they understand that things have moved so fast and things have changed. And it seems like every school district, and that's no pressure, you guys decide what you want, but it just seems like this is a politically driven decision as well, and that's part of the piece as well. So Dr. Hart did communicate last Friday that she understands if we go with a determination to follow the guidance. We've always followed the guidance through this whole thing. So our recommendation is we continue to follow the guidance according to the Maine and US CDC.
What's the recommendation if it goes to high?
The US CDC says we go back to universal masking if we go to high. The Maine CDC has not said anything on that yet.
So is that what we're gonna do if we go back to high?
I think in speaking with Dr. Shaw, his opinion about that is that your school numbers are the most accurate numbers because you live in a county that is, especially in Aroostook, that's so vast, and we've been talking about this whole time. What's happening in Holton might be very different than what's happening in Senegat and Frenchville. So his recommendation is look at your school numbers. What are your school numbers telling you? Pool testing is a big teller in what's happening. So if you have pool test results coming in on Thursday and you see a spike, that's an indicator. But that spike will ultimately lead to school outbreak. And what we're recommending is we use that school outbreak as our switch internally. Erin, did you want to add to that, or I don't want to put you on the spot?
No, that's okay.
As a nurse, how do you feel about that as a nurse?
I feel good about that, and I agree that the pig testing results are a really good indicator right now. During like the height of that Omicron surge that we had, I think we're at like 8 schools that had tested positive out of probably 18. That number can kind of fluctuate. This past week we're at 1. So I think it gives a really good indication kind of where we're at. And I do agree that what's happening in school is a really good indication of what we should do in school, if that makes sense. So I think that number is, and that benchmark will also be I think best received also, because it is applicable to the rules we're putting in school, if that makes sense.
When we spoke to Dr. Shaw, which was last Wednesday, Maine was still Maine. All of the counties, the majority of the counties, were still in red. And we said, Dr. Shaw, how can you make this recommendation if Maine counties are still in red? And he said, you know, the reporting on these maps, the US CDC maps and all that, they're always delayed. So look at all of your measures. He says, you know, Maine CDC, we look at wastewater data, we look at hospitalizations is the big one now. Now it's not who's testing positive, it's who's ending up in the hospital. Those are more accurate numbers. He says, but for schools, ultimately, those school numbers are going to be your best decider of what's going on in your school. So always use that. And we've seen that. We've had an outbreak in Fort Kent and minimal spread here in Frenchville, Senegat. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks later, the numbers are higher in Madawaska and less important. So you see that shift depending on communities. I think the school data is much more valuable.
So if we move into red, are we going to excuse me, not red, but if the schools, the spike, are we gonna automatically go to masking, or are we gonna have another, is that a board decision? How is that gonna work?
I think you've always allowed this administration to have some tipping point, and we've used some discretion on what that means. So I think making a determination on Tuesday for something that happened on Monday is a little premature. I think you have to let a few days at least go by to see, okay, how bad is this, and is it? So when we moved to remote learning for wisdom, you know, we saw those numbers creeping up, but we didn't flick that switch to remote until we saw that third day where now 50% of the students are out absent. So we let those trends kind of tell us what we're doing. I'm telling you that we'd like to use that school outbreak. That's a good indicator to just say to your folks, hey, let's mask up for 5 days and see what happens. And you know, we've been masked up for 2 years, so masking up for 5 days shouldn't be too much of a big deal, and it gives us the time to monitor those numbers. And I think that's why we're recommending that school outbreak is that switch, rather than depending on a US CDC map that might be delayed by 2 weeks. Depending on a Maine CDC recommendation that's not quite in alignment with the US CDC. Let's use hard and true numbers about our school. And then if the Maine CDC notices something else is happening, trending in the nation, we're gonna see it in Florida. It's gonna creep up and they're gonna change guidance and we're gonna have to adjust accordingly. Right now, these, as we know, these are the new guidance that have been given to us last week. That could change next week. I say we take advantage of this guidance based on what's happening today and move forward with it.
Any other questions?
Casey and Jean, do you have questions in Zoom land? Jean says no.
I don't have.
Doesn't either.
Okay, well, with that being said, under new business, we have a motion to adopt the Maine CDC's March 9 recommendation and the MSAD33 transition plan effective immediately.
Now, I recognize that this recommendation is to be effective immediately now because you would have time to communicate with your families tonight in order to make a determination for school. We would not have recommended effective immediately had we not been in a yellow designation. But now that we are in a yellow designation and you fall under a new umbrella of the US CDC, which is also recommended that you go to optional, we feel like a day is okay to move forward with that recommendation. That's why that's there. If the board opts to, change that language to March 9, because that's what the main CDC says, it's understandable.
I'll make a motion to adopt the CDC recommendation.
Lina,
effective immediately.
second. Melissa? Okay, now, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Any discussion?
Oh, any discussion?
Just to
Oh,
clarify,
there you go. Yeah.
I will remove March 9 on there.
Well, it is the main CDC's March 9 recommendation, but they're doing it effective immediately.
Okay, keep it there.
And I have a follow-up question. Seeing I serve 3 districts and Madawaska hasn't met yet.
Yep.
So tomorrow, if you do accept it, means no one has to wear a mask tomorrow here, regardless of Madawaska.
This is an MSAD33 building, so even the Madawaska students will not have to wear masks here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion?
Not yet, Deb. She's about to slingshot.
No, that's what I want to ask. Does that mean that March 7 at 5:25
The
PM?
minute that you vote yes, it's effective immediately, because that's what the language says. If you so choose to vote yes.
So, is there any other discussion?
I just want to say, we moved into this pandemic overnight. We did. And I don't regret the decisions we made. We've stayed with these guidelines the entire time. You guys have been wonderful adhering to every guideline that has been recommended by the Maine and US CDC. This is scary because we know that there's still COVID out there. However, this is the new recommendation. So you're still in alignment with what's being recommended from the Maine and US CDC. So you're not going out of bounds of what you've always decided to do. I just want to say that we've always followed the guidelines.
Ready, this is long overdue.
All right. Those in favor?
Casey and Jean also say yes.
Okay. Oh. Nobody? Motion carried. So I guess as of now, you can take your mask off.
Can I do it now?
Okay, now, there not being any other thing to discuss, motion to adjourn. Josh and Elena. On favor?
Thank you all.
Wow,
Thank you.